All right, welcome to a new episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today is a special kind of episode. We haven't done one of these in a while, but it is a crossover with my other podcast, Bird Road. We recorded this one for both podcasts. So, of course, David Quinones, my co-host over on Bird Road, is the co-host on this episode. And we are talking about a movie called Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets that actually came out in 2020. It's definitely something I think we could hopefully see being a part of the awards consideration as we move into that part of this year. But it's something I didn't want to let slide. I wanted to make sure we got a chance to talk about it here on the show because it's such a unique movie. And I knew when I first heard about this movie that if anyone was going to be the co-host on this episode, it had to be Q because this movie tells the story of the closing day of a bar here in Las Vegas, the kind of bar that Q and I spent all of the first half of our 20s in nightly, pretty much. So this episode is going to be a little different from a usual Piecing It Together. We are going to get into puzzle pieces and all that stuff, and we're going to discuss the themes of the movie and everything, but there's a lot of reminiscing going on. So this is going to be a little bit different, but we have a great conversation coming up. Before we get into that, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is you listen to podcasts, and also make sure to subscribe to Bird Road while you're there. And you can, of course, follow us on social media at PiecingPod. We appreciate your feedback, so if you like the show, rate and review us over on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, and, get in touch with us on social media as well. I always love hearing from people. And don't forget, we do have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus content from all the podcasts that I'm a part of, as well as from my music career. So lots of great stuff going on over on the Patreon. And other than that, we've got a long conversation coming up here because, like I said, we get into a lot of reminiscing, a lot of stuff we talk about, Bird Road style conversation, as well as the Piecing It Together puzzle pieces conversations. So lots of stuff to talk about here. It's a long episode, so let's get into it.
Q.
And I'm Jewish Dave.
And this is a crossover. Insert the cool music here. Between Piecing It Together and Bird Road. So, Dave, we're going to take a little welcome respite during these trying times in our nation's political discourse and the news and the larger macro trends of what's driving all of the news cycles forward and what's, poisoning our brains and all the terrible shit that's going out there. Instead, we're going to focus on something else. What exactly is this Bird Road Piecing It Together crossover episode going to be about today, Dave? And this is a Just Them Boys episode, just me and you. Since we're listening, since some of you are Piecing It Together fans, well, I'll call you David Rosen instead of Jewish Dave. You're nom de plume, you're nom de pod. What are we talking about today, Dave?
Well, you can call me Jewish Dave if you'd like, but yeah, we're going to talk about this movie, Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets, from Bill and Turner Ross, which is this very unique, not documentary, although it is presented as if it's a documentary that kind of centers in on this bar that is supposedly in Las Vegas, although it was really shot in New Orleans. And it's the closing day of this bar, and it's just kind of a Cinema Verite, kind of fly on the wall look at this last day of this bar before it closes. And you just kind of get the feeling of all these people who frequent the bar and who they are, what their lives are, how they connect with each other. And you get little bits and pieces, and it all just kind of puts together in a very unique, different kind of experience of a movie.
Yeah, so maybe what we'll do, Dave, instead of the typical format that your listeners are used to hearing, and I guess there's probably a lot of crossover between our listeners, probably. Sure. Instead of just a straightforward puzzle pieces about like how the movie is influenced or inspired, let's talk a little bit about it because I had talked on social media. I had actually made a few posts on social media about this movie on Twitter and gotten some attention to some people that were also, I guess, fellow fans of specifically one of the actors in the movie and also the movie itself broadly, and New Orleans, I guess New Orleans film Twitter or New Orleans stage Twitter caught a hold of it, and it was cool. It was got a lot of interesting new followers out of that. And
Yeah.
maybe what we can do is talk a little bit about this movie, because one of the things that I had said was that there was a lot that I wanted to unpack about this movie. I thought was fascinating and touching, and it was for me a very late entry as one of my favorite films of last year. I didn't
Mhm.
watch it until technically, I guess, 2021, because I watched it like on, I don't know, like a week ago or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the best thing to do is to just kind of give a quick synopsis of what happens in this movie. It's not a lot. It's a literal day in a life.
Mhm.
And it is an actual literal day in the life. This was shot over the course of 18 hours, not counting the exteriors that were captured in Las Vegas. And I guess some of the exteriors that involved sort of like a B cast of younger delinquents that was shot outside of the bar.
Mhm.
These guys shot this movie, and I don't want to get too into the technical stuff of it, although this is one of those movies where you watch it and you kind of get really inspired because you read about how these guys did it, and you're like, oh man, that's all it takes to do a really, really good movie. And
Right.
so they mic'd up this bar, which is called the Roaring Twenties, outside of sort of the outer areas of New Orleans, that
Mhm.
happens to look like a lot of the sort of anonymous. I'm thinking of places like streets in Las Vegas, like Eastern and like Maryland Parkway and
Yeah.
Industrial and Decatur and places like that. It looks just like one of these sort of like middle distance off strip streets in Vegas.
Yeah.
And they
And
mic'd up
Vegas
this.
is such an interesting place to set that, because like I don't think most people that are going to go into this movie understand that that's even part of Vegas, that there is like this world of these little small bars and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you say that, and I think that when people think of Las Vegas, what they think of is two different things, right? I think that there's the very, very basic understanding of Las Vegas as this like tourist destination with this ever evolving, gaudy monstrosity of a strip. And maybe
Mhm.
if you have like a little bit of a deeper understanding or no knowledge or like geographical footprint, you know that there's also the downtown area, which is in its own way equally gaudy and maybe not as updated, and not as like slick. Like the Vegas Strip today doesn't resemble Vegas Strip from 20 years ago. The Vegas Strip
Right.
from 20 years ago doesn't resemble the Vegas Strip from 1980. Right?
Mhm.
It's this ever evolving monster. Right? There's that, which is like a super basic bitch understanding of Las Vegas, and then if you have like a little bit more nuanced understanding of Las Vegas as a city, you probably know the outer ring of Vegas, which is like the developing area, which is where you live, like
Mhm.
Summerlin and Spanish Trails and Green Valley, I suppose, and all those kind of places that have
Yeah.
popped up and gone from being a city of like 300,000 to a city of like 2 million and very quickly
Right.
in a matter of no time. When you and I were kids in college, there was a period where 40,000 people were moving to Las Vegas every month. Every month,
Yeah.
40,000 people were moving. And I mean, I segue to like our own history, because like I think this movie, why maybe it resonated for both of us, is it's very resonant of the kind of places that we spent time
Yeah.
in our youth. Like, talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard about this movie, which was months ago, actually, the first thing I thought of is if this ends up being something, worth talking about, Q has to be the guest on the Piecing It Together episode if we end up doing one. Because, yeah, this is the kind of place that we would have spent like 4 or 5 nights a week. And maybe I'm being conservative by saying that it was probably a lot more than that during our 20s and into when did you move away? How old
I
were you
was
when you moved?
26 when I moved away.
Okay.
Twenty-six.
So yeah, that was 5 years of
So
this.
you and I were hanging out pretty solid from age, like for me, it was
Yeah.
like from age 20 or 21
Yeah.
to age 26, pretty much
Yeah.
every night, every night,
Y yeah,
to
almost.
the dismay of many girlfriends and
Yeah.
many other friends and people who, family members who demanded our time. And
I don't know how anyone put up with that, like, whether it's girlfriends or family members or anything,
everybody,
like
everybody in our lives came second to us. And not in a healthy good way, not in a
Yeah.
like, I'll be there for you Chandler and Joey kind of way, but in a really
Yeah.
dark bad way. So wait, was I'll be there for you, was that the Friends song or no?
Yeah, that was
I'll
the
be
Friends song.
there for that wasn't some other song. Okay, all right, there you go.
Yeah, that was Friends.
So yeah, and it's funny because you and I were text chatting about like trying to nail down what this bar would be, I listened to some interviews with the directors of this movie, and I want to get into sort of like the more deeper shit that I want to unpack out of this movie, because I do find it to be a great telling of like a broken social compact in this country, like a very unique prism of how capitalism has failed this country, how neoliberalism has failed this country. That not like a big 10,000 foot view of it, but more like a really focused in, tight look at the effects, like just
Right.
in one little space. Because this bar that is in the midst of closing, that's about to go out of business, and is sort of the narrative drive of this movie. It's in for the people, for the denizens of people that are there, like it's replaced what used to be community, right? Like
Right.
there used to be in a America of a bygone era. A lot of these people, like some of the characters that maybe you can talk about, are veterans, right? Some of them fought in foreign wars. Some of them served. Others were like, just if you infer, and none of the dialogue and none of the storytelling is too on the nose about this, so you're never able to fully understand exactly. You're never given a full contextual understanding of who all these people are. All you get is like,
Sure.
nibbles here and there of what their background is, but generally you understand each of these people to be the kind of person who their contributions to society in a bygone era would have been the kind of thing that would have resulted in them not whiling their hours away in a bar for lack of anywhere else to go, hanging on to the very bottom rungs of society, right?
Yeah, and it's funny that, like, right now, social media is, of course, the thing that, accelerates that whole phenomenon to where it's supposed to be connecting everybody, but it ends up turning everybody into kind of like these islands where they don't really have anything, and so these people had this spot where it was
Yeah.
like their little bit of a real community.
And I always felt, because we did go to places like this a lot in Vegas, and that's what I wanted to like kind of talk about first before we got into that, is a little bit more of a superficial conversation you and I were having about like, okay, what is the actual spot that this would be based on in Vegas?
Yeah.
Um, and even at our and you were never down and out, but I sure was. Like you always had like, pretty solid support. I was a little more of a phantasm in the wind. Yeah, and like you could literally find me on the streets in Vegas
Yeah.
at given times. But it like I still always felt, because we were young, we had all of our teeth, like we were in good shape. We
Mhm.
had enough money for meals. We had roofs over our heads. Like
Yeah.
I always felt like I'd be interested to hear if you think this too. I always felt like in these, when we would go hang out at these places, sometimes I felt like a bit of an intruder and a tourist.
Mm.
Like I was intruding in a place that I probably shouldn't be. And while you and I thought it was cute or funny or just maybe kitsch to be in these
Right.
places, like there were people there that did not find irony in their status there. And that's who
Yeah.
this movie focuses on, is those people. I always felt, maybe it wasn't until later when I got a little bit more perspective or something like that, but I kind of felt like an asshole being in these places. And this is the kind of place where, like, if you don't belong there, like, you shouldn't probably be there. You're kind of an asshole to go there and gawk at these people that are in, varying stages of their lives, but none of them good. None of them are in a
Yeah.
great place in their life.
Right, right, and yeah, I think, like, that ironic detachment, like, was pretty heavy for us at the time,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's true.
yeah, I don't think that I really thought about it, like, when we were just going out getting drunk from bar to bar to bar and, like, not really thinking about whether or not we belonged in the places we were going. It was more just about, what are we gonna get up to tonight, and what are we gonna see, and, are we gonna meet people, like, what's gonna happen, and that's another thing, like, I for us, it's kind of especially a little bit weird because a lot of times we just be in the corner just laughing at our own dumb shit and not really connecting with other people. But
Yeah,
then there would be those random nights where we totally did, and we would
yeah.
just we'd meet a bunch of people and end up in a whole new little crowd and just all kinds of stuff like that happening.
Yeah, that's funny, and that you say that, because I was thinking about that as I was watching this movie, about like the different dynamics and how they would play out on different nights, and how unpredictable Las Vegas is. As you know, let me pose this to you right now. This was something that I had sort of noted here on my run sheet, and I was going to wait until a little bit later to ask you this. But like, has a movie nailed Vegas yet? Because this movie doesn't. This movie does a
Right.
great. I think you and I really love and appreciate the fact that they set it in Vegas. But as we said at the outset of the movie, I'm sorry, at the outset of this episode, it's not actually set in Vegas. And if
Right.
you are from Vegas, and if you have this very specific, I guess, perspective that you and I have, you know, it's very obvious, and you kind of have to suspend your
It's
disbelief a little bit.
frustrating too for people like us.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is I read about it, and you know what the deciding factor was for these guys in terms
Hmm.
of like being able to actually scout a location, because they scouted locations in Vegas.
Okay.
And the problem was with their budget in Vegas, this proposition of shutting down a bar and filming in it for 24 hours is becomes so much more expensive because of the gambling revenue, because of the table games, the table game, or not the table games, the video blackjack, the
Right.
video poker. The video poker, if you were to shut down, which they did, this bar Roaring Twenties in New Orleans, it would only cost, I don't know, whatever, a couple $1,000, because all you have to do is pay the bar for what business they're losing for that period of time. To do that in Vegas is exponentially more, because along with all the liquor sales, people are pumping $20 bills, $100 bills into these into the machines, and the creators, the Ross brothers, I think is what their names are.
Yeah, Ross Brothers. Yeah.
Yeah, they I heard a podcast where they were talking about how that was a deal breaker for them. They weren't able to secure any of the places that they actually wanted in Vegas because the asking price was so high.
That makes so much sense too,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think that that's also like a thing like Gina with her photography. Like if she wanted to like shoot at a place, like a lot of the times you get met with a big no because there's just too much
Corporate
business that needs to
liability
be
and
shut
bullshit.
down, and yeah, and so much of that. Like it's a strange town for film and that kind of related stuff.
So like, has a movie nailed Vegas yet, in your opinion? Like, have you seen a movie that gets like what I was saying before about those two understandings of Vegas? Like everybody, the commercial, the Hangover, the broader mainstream understanding of Las Vegas as this crazy nightlife place. Oh my God, you wake up in bed with a goat or something, and then like the wild and crazy Todd Phillips shit, or the more kind of like, I guess, Tony Shay understanding of like, oh well, this is a city on the rise, and there's actually a growing population and infrastructure shit, and then in the middle, like almost like a donut, like a donut in the middle of a small donut and a big donut, right?
Hmm.
There's this parameter of streets, maybe like from Paradise to Eastern on the east side, and then from like Industrial out to Rainbow or Decatur on the west
Hmm.
side, of unchangingness. That if you
Hmm.
drive down those streets, for the most part, if you drive down that whole anywhere through those sectors of Las Vegas, which is like a big grid basically, it's unchanged, and you feel like you could walk into any one of those little bars that look like the Roaring Twenties or feel like the Roaring Twenties, have the same musty smell that it had 25 years ago, 30 years ago. See a lot of the same faces that were there 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I think of that. I don't think of your home. You're like, I don't know, how old is where you live? Like 15 years old, maybe. I don't know, whatever.
Right,
Like,
something like
I
that.
don't think of you where you live as like the real Las Vegas. You probably don't either. I
No.
don't think of like, I don't know, the Wynn Hotel as the real Las Vegas. I don't even really think of the Bellagio as the real Las Vegas. I think
No.
of that middle ground, that middle area, the middle distance of like
Yeah.
Decatur, Valley View, Eastern, Paradise, I'm trying to think, Spencer, like all these kind of like, and to a lot of the people who don't live in Vegas, you're hearing me just spout off these like random street names. And what I'm trying to get across is like our old stomping grounds
Right.
that mirror what was seen in Bloody Nose Empty Pockets. And to that extent, I'm asking you, like, have you seen a movie yet, or even maybe TV, that has nailed that? Because I feel like that's still mysterious, unexplored, and to me, maybe because we lived through it, very fascinating slice of Americana that's like this weird, very unique. It's not like anything else in the rest of the country.
Well, and it's interesting you put it that way because I think part of the reason why it hasn't been captured is because it is kind of anonymous in a way. Like it is kind of you just wouldn't know that that is what Vegas is if you weren't someone who, spent their 20s here, or any kind of time, I guess some people are in their 30s and 40s and beyond still going to those places. But yeah, I mean, if you didn't spend your time in those kinds of places, you probably wouldn't realize that that is what big, huge chunks of Vegas is. And I think even for a lot of people who do live here, probably still only really think of either the Strip or the big, Summerlin and Green Valley type suburbs.
So let's talk about this movie a little bit, right?
Hmm.
Itself, as opposed to the context around it, which I find. Look, the context is what landed it. The fact that it's like what landed it on my radar. That
Yeah,
it's supposed to be set at, as it was explained in another one of your episodes, at a Dino's kind of place, which you and I kind of agree is not exactly the
sure.
correct thing. It's if you're from Vegas, and I know we have a lot of listeners from Vegas. Dino's is sort of a like you talked about ironic detachment before. There's no
Hmm.
ironic detachment in this place. This is a
Right.
place where the despair or the circumstance, as it were, is what it is. It's there. It's not pretending to be a dive bar. I thought of something interesting, Dave. Our favorite bar, you and I. What is it? You know what it is, right?
Well, I mean, it depends on the
There's
the
only one.
era.
No, but come on. There's only one.
I mean, Moose's is the
No, no,
best.
no, no, no. Not
So you're
Moose's. Come
talking
on.
Double Down or what?
Double Down. Yes, the Double
Okay.
Down.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Double Down is a place where amongst the, millennial or Gen X crowd like me and you, probably would be considered like the most authentic dive bar in, I don't know, the country. Maybe it's up there. It's great. It's a
Sure.
great place. We still go there as graying, aging old men that we are now. Like we'll still put on leather jackets and go there, and it's just like the saddest shit in the world, but we do it. And but think about something. If you and I were like 21 right now, in the year of our Lord 2021 right now, and we
Mhm.
walked into Double Down for the first time, I think we would think that it was lame and that it was try hard and that it was like it was trying to be something that it's not. That it was that Double Down is trying. I know this is heresy and sacrilege that I'm saying right
Yeah.
now. I see it in your face.
This is crazy.
This is crazy. But think of us, our brains poisoned, as I've said that they are, completely rotted with the modern context of what it is to be living in the year
Well,
2021.
it's also hard for me to imagine being 21 right now, but continue though.
Walking into that place and just being like, oh, the dive of this dive bar is painted on the walls. It's all just painted on the walls. It's just like
Mhm.
you could turn this into something else in 2 seconds and there would just be a different clientele. You walk out and 20 feet away from you, there's the Hard Rock Casino, which, has $500 a hand blackjack tables.
Yeah.
I mean, and those people permeate. They find their way over to the Double Down. They're wearing, I don't know what like the expensive clothing would be. Like back in the day, Armani. I don't know what the fuck people wear now. Balenciaga. I don't know. But like, they'll come over and they'll be there. They'll be gawking too and looking around like, oh, look at that. The word fuck is written on the wall. They don't even
Right.
care, And it's like, okay, that's one thing. That's one thing. But this place, this Roaring Twenties, and the archetype that it represents, that you and I used to attend, are something different. And I kind of want to talk about, I thought maybe a good entryway into the movie would be like the people that you meet there. And I on that same podcast I was talking about, I listened to the directors talk about the way that they cast this movie. And there's really only about a handful of trained actors.
Mhm.
And a lot of them are more like just kind of playing themselves. And I thought maybe you might know a little bit more about that. Maybe you could talk about like who are some of the people that we're meeting in this movie in the Roaring Twenties.
Well, before we get into that, I do want to just say that like the thing you were just talking about, I think really speaks to 2021 and authenticity and how it just doesn't really exist anymore. So
It's
but
an
that's
idea. It's a
Yeah.
marketing slogan. Is it like it's not when you talk about authenticity, you're not talking about actual things that are authentic. You're talking
Yeah.
about the manufacturing of authenticity. You're not
Hmm.
talking about authenticness, like an actual authenticness. You're talking about like very lifelike simulacrums. You're talking
Right.
about things that really pass for being authentic and
Yeah.
aren't. You're talking about wood grain. You're talking about things that are made to look like a thing that they're not.
Yeah. Well, going to some of the characters though, and I have to apologize to people listening at home. It was a little hard to get like character names after the fact, like online. Like there's really only four cast members listed on IMDb and
Right.
stuff like that. So I kind of got to go by characteristics and describing a lot of these people. But I mean, I think the one that has kind of dominated the conversation because he's kind of the heart of the film is Michael Martin, but everybody's kind of has their own name as far as characters. So he's
Yeah,
Michael,
laying
but
out my claim right now. I said it earlier in the show. Michael Martin for Dave. I don't know what the qualifications are. Maybe you can help me understand the difference between whether Michael Martin, a mainstay in the New
mm,
Orleans film and acting world, whose face you would very unique face you would probably recognize from things like he had a bit role in Get Hard. He stood out in Preacher. He was on the TV show Breakout Kings. Mostly known from his stage work. This guy deserves an Oscar. I started the campaign on Twitter a couple of days ago. It got interrupted by the insurrection in Washington, D.C., like 3 hours later. But it got a little bit of heat. If you're out there, if you're on Twitter, if you're a film person, take a look at I'm going to pin that tweet. Go in there and retweet it. Come on, add your name to the voice. This guy deserves an Academy Award. And I'm not being hyperbolic with that. I don't know if what I was going to ask you is whether he would qualify as a lead or like supporting actor. I guess he would probably have to be a supporting actor based on what the lines or the number of scenes he's in or whatever. But
yeah, there's so much about this movie that makes it like impossible to tell like what would qualify as what, like even if it qualifies as a narrative or not. I mean, which of course it is. It's not a documentary. Me and Jason Harris have argued about this, and it's definitely not a documentary, but it just rides such a strange line, and it's so hard to classify any of this. But to your point though, yeah, I mean, the fact that something we touched on earlier, that we really don't get to know too much about any of these people, just like little glimpses and little bits and pieces, but yet you feel like you know so much about this Michael character just because he's just so open and so, I mean, talk about authenticity. I mean, he feels seriously like a real person that you
right.
have gotten to know by the end of this 2 hours.
He's a broken person in the last Michael Martin. Anyway, he plays a character named Michael, and he is where all the other people are sort of denizens of the bar. He's a citizen of it. He lives there. He camps out. We're led to we're sort of shown that very frequently he'll camp out on either the stoop or just outside the bar or in the on like a sort of dusty couch in the corner and
Mhm.
keeps a lot of his stuff in hidden alcoves inside the bar, his personal effects, his belongings. He has a very quiet, understated conversation with one of the other characters whose name, again, like it's kind of hard to grab all the names out of the characters in this
It
movie, but
is. Yeah.
one of the younger characters who is comparing his own sort of destitute circumstances with Michael's, and he says, "Yeah, but I'm sure you have a bed." And the character says, the other character is like, "Yeah, I have a bed. I have a bed, man. I do." And he goes, "Well, you're ahead of the game than, versus me." And then one of the most touching things that made me want to cry is that the other character said, "I have a couch too, man. I have a couch."
Yeah.
And he basically was offering him his couch. And that was so sweet. That made me want to cry. And you hear those drunken conversations, whether that guy really meant it or not. It's kind of like the beer talk that you do hear and that
Right.
sometimes you say, sometimes that you will say. And this is a bar where like the drugs are flowing very freely. Everybody's doing coke, everybody's doing acid and like getting fucked up and doing Molly and stuff. But they're not, it's very real where it's not like Hunter S. Thompson shit. It's not Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, tripping balls falling all over the place. It's just everybody's kind of faded to one
Yeah.
degree or another. Everybody like is kind of move. And when you're doing a little bit of coke, like that's the kind of shit that you say to like a vagrant who you're kind of semi friends with. You're like, "Hey, I got a couch, man." And to me, that's sweet. That's so nice
Yeah.
because that's what the best parts of you come out when you're on cocaine.
Yeah.
Like
And then I'm like, Q, we really gotta go.
we gotta leave, man. We gotta get out of here. No, this is my new friend, Michael. Um, but yeah, I mean, and for me, one of my favorite scenes with Michael Martin, who again deserves an Academy Award. And I'm not being hyperbolic. This guy does an incredible job in like the 4 or 5 really crunchy scenes that they give him to work with. Because he's in a lot of the movie, but he
Oh
has
yeah,
four or
he's the
five real
closest thing
standout
to a through
scenes.
line the movie has as far as like
Yeah.
any particular character.
Right. He introduces the movie by being the first patron to show up in the morning, and we're led to believe that every morning he shows up there first before anybody
Yeah.
else. And he's also in a just exceedingly bittersweet, sad, quiet moment. The last patron to leave the bar, we're led to
Mhm.
believe, because I think the last people that are there are employees who are locking up. Yeah, the other scene was between him and an actor who I looked up the name. His name's Peter Elswith. He plays a character named Pete, and the two of them. The character Pete is a younger guy and maybe like his late 20s, early 30s, drunk, kind of on. We're shown again that in this little short aperture that we see of these people's one night, that this guy Pete is pretty much on the same track as Michael, who's an older man, a much older man.
Mhm.
And I don't know, what did you think of that scene? Maybe you can describe it and tell me what your impression was of the two of them on the couch.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like a really sweet thing that the two of them had. I mean, you could tell that these two people within the world of this movie have just, really bonded over this like sense of community that we've been talking about with the feeling that is alive there in the bar. And these two people, they connect in such a way that it's just really touching to watch and to see that like they probably don't get that anywhere else, but they get it from this friendship that is bonded within the bar, even if, like we said, they're completely faded and, who
Yeah.
knows how much of it lasts into the next day. But for the moment, for being there, it's there.
Yeah, what's happening is that on this like dusty, shitty bar couch, the character Michael was in the process of kind of falling asleep in the middle of this very raucous party, this goodbye party, and Pete's character, who wants to keep the party going, is trying to wake him up. Come on, get back to the party. Let's have fun. And they engage in this conversation where Michael basically tells him like, you got to get out of this bar. You got to get out of this bar and not go back into another one.
Yeah.
And asks him like, how old do you think I am? And the Pete character is cordial and nice about it, and guesses something far younger, because this guy does look like he's in his 70s. And he's like, I'm 58. I'm only 58 years old. Look at me. This is what this has
Mhm.
done to me. And I don't want to take the piss out of this movie for anybody. I mean, like, you should watch it yourself. I'm not doing it justice. And the scene is just another scene that's like really touching, very real and profound. It's this like concept of shared failure, or maybe aspirational failure. Like, this guy Pete knows he's on the track to be that, and at the age of 29 or 30 or whatever, he's fine with it, because that's kind of like that rebellious streak you have, or just that stupid dumb bravery where like life is going to figure itself out. I'll be okay. I'll get it. Even
Yeah.
at our age, we still have that in some ways. Like, oh, I'll figure it out. It'll be fine. I still have plenty of time. And you made this observation when we were talking about it. A lot of the characters that we meet before nightfall in this movie are older. They're older
Yeah.
people in their, I would just guess, like 50s, 60s, 70s. And then the younger people show up at night. There's like a crowd
Sure.
of sort of younger, I guess avatars for the older people. Like, they're gonna be those older people in a few years, in a few decades, I should say. But
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the character who was there were two characters who both played, and their narrative I thought was really interesting. It was two characters, an older white woman and an older black man, and the two of them were commiserating over their shared experience in the military,
Mhm.
and the way that they'd been discarded, and the way that nobody in their life wanted them anymore, and only the two of them wanted to be with each other. And they didn't have family left. They didn't have anybody that was left in their lives, and all that they had was this sort of this community, this bar. Like, what did you
Yeah.
do you remember the scene I'm talking about, right? I mean, it
Oh
kind of came
yeah.
really quick, but it was also like the most powerful scene probably in the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it really like speaks to the idea that these people probably outside of this bar have if they do have anyone left, they've been like pushed away. They've been alienating other people outside of this little world that they have there. But yeah, I don't have the character's name, but the black dude who's a veteran, I love that character almost as much as Michael. I just think he's so great, and he's such a fully realized person. He's
Yeah.
that guy who
He is that
just
guy.
he's just, you always
Just talk
overhear him
shit.
at a bar. Yeah,
He
you
and he
overhear him. He's
butts
got these
in.
big ideas and butts into every
Yeah.
conversation, and
Yep.
he's such a perfect
He
character.
can't quite enunciate what his ideas are,
Yeah,
but they're very conspiratorial and they're very dark, and they're very I forget what the scene is, but he's basically like, at one point there's two younger guys talking about just like, I don't know. The other thing I really love about this movie that's very real is everybody's politics and ideas and like their narratives and the things that they're talking about are wrong and broken in a lot of weird, fucked up ways. There's a lot of generational warfare and blaming of the older people. The older people blaming themselves, but telling the young people that they're pussies. And like I love that broken dialogue because that's real. Like that broken, dysfunctional, the dysfunctional beliefs that are just really rooted in like acrimony and this lived experience of constantly getting fucked over in life, of this like larger machine of America just fucking you over. And all these people are in various stages of getting fucked over by this machine. And they all, you know what it reminds me of? I'll tell you what this movie reminds me of. The parable of the thing that a million movies have used in a terrible way and never used right. The parable of the blind man and the elephant. You know this?
I think I've heard this before.
So the blind man and the elephant is where I guess it's multiple blind men or blindfolded men or something, or I don't know. It has to be your bull. I forget. No, but it's the thing where like if a bunch of blind men touch an elephant in a different place, they'll describe 10 different animals based on what they're touching, and that's what happens in this movie, and what a lot of the interaction between these people boils down to is that they're all in a different place in their life on this cycle of getting fucked over and trampled and run over by American capitalism and by our empire, right? Because a lot of them were served in the military and just being refuse from the American experiment, and they're all touching it in a different place. And they all have a different prescription of what's wrong with the world and what led to this like cataclysmic moment of their community bar, their institution shutting down. They all are fighting over what's wrong, and they're all right. They're all correct.
Sure.
In everything that they say is equally right and also wrong at the same time.
Yeah. It's got to be a really hard movie to write because, like, with them not being trained actors, most of them, like, you got to assume that it's not a lot of improv involved. I mean, there's maybe some, but a lot of this has to be written, and it's got to be a hard thing to really, like, put to paper in any meaningful way.
I have a little insight on that. Not a lot was put on paper.
Oh, okay.
There were, based on, again, I listened to an interview that was done by IndieWire with these two directors. These two creators, I guess, because again, these guys were just with handhelds going around and being like, "Don't look at us. We pretend we're not here," which is why it had that Cinema Verite feel to it, and or I guess you call it direct cinema. Like technically, this is direct cinema, not Cinema Verite. Okay. But anyway, there were prompts and character points, basically. Like they would tell people, your character has A, B, and C, and then fill in whatever else you want. You're going to have a conversation at some point during the night with this person, and it's going to be about broadly this. And so I think that they must have committed some things to script, but I think that's probably, particularly dialogue, I think must have been committed to paper, because there are some things that were just too deep and too profound, and I mean, too perfect. And it's I like, for instance, the scene that we talked about earlier where Peter Elwes, I think his last name's Elwes or Elsu or something like that, and Michael Martin were on the couch. That was a scripted scene. And it was beautiful and it was great and it was well written. And those are two actors. Those are two actors with previous credits. If you look at their IMDb's, those are two trained actors.
Right.
Not so for a lot of the other scenes.
Yeah.
And I think what they were doing was just working off prompts, which is a fascinating way to do it. And I
Yeah.
guess it was like could have turned out really bad, and
Yeah.
it didn't. It didn't.
That's amazing. You know, another thing that you should have some good insight into, we should talk about the bartenders for a minute because
Oh yeah,
you've been on both sides of the bar. You have been a
yep.
bartender a bunch of
I've been
times over the years, various different places, small places like this and big Vegas-y clubs as well. So,
Yeah.
how do you feel about the portrayal of these bartender characters?
The bartender. There are two archetypes that they show. There's the they nailed also the shifts that they work. The burly, brawny dude working the day shift who's maybe a little bit past his prime, mid to late 30s, probably used to bartend on the strip, packed on 20-30 pounds too much to be able to pull off the sexy guy look, and then is relegated to off strip basically, and
Uh-huh.
but has the personality, has the patter, has the conversation skills. I mean, in this case, this character had broke out the guitar and would play music, and I know those bartenders. I viewed those guys growing up. And I say growing up because I was really a kid when this shit was going on, but like I viewed them aspirationally. Like, wouldn't it be cool to be that guy one day?
Right.
And those guys make money. That's the thing. That guy's not like poor because he gets tokes off of the machine, and the machines will pay out like, I don't know, a couple thousand in a day. And so you bring home $400 or $500 off of the machine play, plus like $100 from your tips. That's $500 for a day of work. That's not so bad. And then if you pull like a weekend shift, you get even more. And then the other archetype was the her looks are fading single mom
Hmm.
uh bartender, woman. And I knew that character too. She's very like, they nailed it, man. She's very like accommodating and understanding to a point, and is very sweet because she is manipulating and being in charge of a situation that could go bad. We see a few times there's almost a bar fight. There are altercations. There are people who don't pay their tab, or things like that. That doesn't happen in the movie, I don't think. But that is another thing that archetype has to deal with, has to struggle with. I thought they nailed the bartenders, and the bartenders. I thought that another thing she has to do is sort of reject the advances of a lot of
Hmm.
the which, I mean, those women are brick walls. You're
Yeah.
not getting through. You're not breaking down those walls. Those women, you'll think the whole night long that oh, she's in love with me. She if she could only see what I really am on the inside, what my soul is like, this could be the one.
Yeah.
And you literally don't exist to her. You you are a void of like gray. That all she sees is a void of gray
Mhm.
and a bar tab. That's all that she sees when she looks at you, and you do not exist. And so I thought they nailed them, and the sort of general attitude that they have. Like, yeah, they killed it. They did a good job. I don't know if those are archetypes that translate outside of Las Vegas. I think those are really specific bartender types. I don't really see those people. Like, I've lived in Miami 15 years now and never bartended here or anything like that, but I've been to bars, been to a lot of bars, spent a lot of time in bars here. And yeah, I don't, I think that that's a uniquely Vegas thing. And I think that those guys really benefited the Ross brothers from their extensive research that they did
Yeah.
by nailing those characters down.
One other thing I wanted to bring up is the music in this movie, which I still am just baffled how they got the clearance for this much music. There's
Okay.
so much. Michael
You're
Jackson,
not
The
going to like the
Weeknd,
answer.
just
You're not going to like the answer.
okay.
So these guys, and they talked about that on that same podcast that I listened to. The Ross brothers, instead of spending money on clearances, they spend money on a clearance lawyer. And the lawyer
Mm,
writes in and contributes to the script and contributes to the editing process to put the music in a specific context where it's fair use. And every single one of these has been passed through a legal filter. Every use of these of music in this movie has been passed through a legal filter that clears the definition of fair use, because that is something that they mentioned. One of the things that they were very much sabotaged in this regard too, because they wanted, for the purposes of editing in post, they wanted there to be no music playing during the night of the filming,
which would have been weird, I'd imagine.
and apparently they had a mutiny. The actors mutinied on them and refused to allow it. The actors said, "No, we want this. Can't be a party," because the direction was, the key overarching direction from these two directors was actually have fun, drink, party, have a good time, natural reactions. Follow the prompts, follow the script to the extent that you can, but be natural and be real. And every once in a while, they would go and they would shut off the jukebox, and then somebody would be like, "Where the hell is the music? You guys can't keep shutting the music off." And they said in their own words that they had a mutiny on their hands, basically. Like that's amazing. The various actors were just turning the music back on and telling them to fuck off. So after that, they had to go to their lawyer and say, "Okay, we've got all this stuff with Michael Jackson, the background and all that." And so the lawyer would give them very specific instructions of how to make sure that it passes fair use, the criteria for fair use, and they were able to do it without having to. Except, I think in some circumstances they had to pay, but for the most part they didn't.
That's awesome. Like I'm glad they were able to make that work, because again, that speaks to the authenticity of the movie, because you cannot have a night out at a bar without hearing Michael Jackson, even if it's a freaking metal bar or something, you're still gonna hear Michael Jackson.
It's gonna play. Yeah, you're gonna hear that. You're gonna hear you're gonna hear some TLC no matter what. Like you're gonna hear some shit that is always played in a bar. Yeah. I wanted to pose a question to you before we get into these puzzle pieces now.
Sure.
Where in Las Vegas would you set a single location movie? And I have an answer for this. But if you had, this enormous Hollywood budget that the Ross brothers had of like $15,000, and you were able to make this movie or a movie, where would you set 24 hours or one night in the life of type movie in Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult question to answer, because I'm sure it's like all really difficult.
Give me your pitch.
And all that.
Give me a pitch. Come on, on the fly. Pitch me. Okay, here's the
an interesting movie, and this is just such a basic answer, but would be Fremont East. I mean, that would be the interesting place to set the movie, I think.
What's going on there? Like, what's the tenor of Fremont East? Fremont East to me was like, back in the days, was very much like the neighborhood where this movie takes place, which was just people laying in the street with gunshot wounds. I mean, like, again, not being hyperbolic, like people just bleeding out in the street. But I know that it's completely different now.
Well, it might be like that now because of COVID, but certainly for the last 10 years, though, it hasn't been like that ever since, with the downtown project and all that, Tony Shay and all that. And yeah, I mean, that's where all of like the hip bars are. And they've really just revitalized it with it just has its own look. It's very Vegas, but at the same time, it's, more of like a hipster downtown Vegas. And I think it would lend itself to a very like flashy film.
So mine would be the various people and stories and interactions that happen at a record store off the strip, and this is how I would tweak it. In the morning, early in the morning, it's the father, opens it up, 8 a.m, works until like 4 o'clock. The son comes in, and this is a record store that is open till 10 o'clock at night. And is a completely different situation after the owner leaves and the son is in charge. And if only I could find a location, I think that this could be a really cool movie.
That sounds fun.
We could.
Yeah. I like all of it except for the real life version where I work till 10 p.m. Please leave me out of that.
Which would never fucking happen. So yeah, I just want to once more, before we jump into the puzzle pieces, Michael Martin, best supporting actor. Come on, guys, let's make this happen. I don't even know how you do it. Like, what is the way that you create a grassroots campaign like this, Dave? Like, let's get Michael Martin's name out there.
I'm in. I'm in.
Okay.
I think it should happen.
So let's jump into the puzzle pieces, which that's
Yeah.
actually your job to have said that. So I wish that you would
That is
take
my
your
job.
work more seriously. And
So Q, what do you got for your first puzzle piece? Did I do
what's the
good?
movie? What is the movie? What is the movie that you guys are always doing for a puzzle piece that I made fun of?
Evil Dead?
No, it's not Evil Dead. That is one though. No,
Yeah.
it's something else. I
No.
feel like it was Heat or something, but no, whatever. Okay, so my first puzzle piece is a little messy. I know that you have some messiness built into yours too, and we've actually already used the name of one of my puzzle pieces several times. My puzzle piece is two things. My first one is An American Family, which was the 1973 PBS documentary by Craig Gilbert, and then the HBO fictionalization of the making of that documentary, which was called Cinema Verite, which came out in 2011 and
Okay.
was directed by Sherry Springer Berman and the team of Sherry Springer Berman and Robert Pulcini. This follows the Loud family, which was this incredibly, this documentary was this incredibly influential text of how what television and what film would become later. It was this look into a family that this was as opposed to Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets, as opposed to this scripted non-documentary movie. This was a documentary. This started as a documentary. And then
Right.
Cinema Verite was like more of a prestige, with that HBO sheen added to it.
Hmm.
Very faithful, from what I understand, recreation of the series, and with a look behind the scenes of what was going on. A lot of the characters from that, for instance, the son was one of the first gay people that was kind of in the early 70s. It was this really weird situation where it was like everybody knew Liberace was gay, but like
Right.
nobody would say it. It was one of those things. That was kind of the prevailing attitude still in the early to mid 70s. And that one of the sons on this show was gay, and obviously it was a very early depiction of divorce, which you didn't see divorce happen very often, on television. It was more specifically a harsher look at the failings of the American dream and the fictions of what the American dream is. And this was an upper middle class, waspy, rich white family, and you saw the cracks in what their existence was. Now, I'm not trying to compare their existence to the characters and the people that we meet in the Roaring Twenties, but they are pulling back the same curtain. They're showing the same failings. They're showing the same faults with our culture, with our society. They're showing all the same shortcomings that versus what you think you're being promised, what you think you're going to get out of life, and what you actually do get. And with the way that it was shot, similarly, it's unflinching and very to the bone, I would say. Do you ever see either of those or no?
I never have. I certainly am aware of it. And my first piece was just going to be reality television as a medium, because
Reality television as a medium was obviously birthed mostly from
right.
like the modern, what we think of as reality television. I think you can agree came from Real World, and Real World was a direct descendant of An American Family.
Exactly. And yeah, and I think that it's important to note that blurred line of this movie between what's reality and what's scripted. And that's, a thing with reality television, that you never quite know exactly, and it doesn't matter exactly what is and isn't real within the movie. And of course we know Bloody Nose Empty Pockets is, essentially completely a narrative film, but still just keeping you uncertain of how much of it is either scripted or improv or based in some form of reality is something that really makes it interesting, and is what I think people take away from reality TV so much.
It's funny you say that, because like that triggered a memory for me, a moment when you and I were doing less of this kind of going out. There was like, we went in phases, right? We would be
Mm,
like fancy lads on some
yeah,
occasions, and then there were some times when we were like complete scumbags. And
I would still wear
um
my New Balance though, no matter what.
and at risk of getting us kicked out of whatever fucking trendy ass
Yes.
place we were trying to go to.
Yeah.
On that topic though, there was like a brief period, I suppose, where like we were going. I mean, the Palm sticks out in my head a lot, but like the various clubs and high rent type places that were at the is the Palm still like trendy and cool? Is it still like the place to go get hepatitis or like what?
The Palms hasn't reopened since COVID, and there's rumors it never will. So,
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
So there you go. There was boys and girls. Once upon a time, the Palms was the
yeah,
cool shit to
it
do.
was this
It was
thing
like it
that,
had the four coolest clubs in Vegas, if that's what you were into doing,
yeah,
were at the Palms. And Dave and I would go with rotating cast of friends and significant others. And this was happening, Dave, at the same time. Do you remember this? It was going on during the same time that they were shooting the Real World season in
yeah,
Las Vegas.
oh yeah,
And I think to your point about like that blurred line, how many times did we walk up to a venue where it was like, oh, if you're coming into this, there was like a disclaimer outside, like, oh, if you're coming into this venue, know that you're being filmed. We have this shooting happening or this filming happening. You go in, and we would see things like I specifically think of not even at the Palms, but at the Venetian at V Bar, where we would very frequently go in a quote unquote ultra lounge, which another thing I'm not sure if it still exists or not in the Venetian, and you would see them go through a scene. They would do
yeah,
like the same thing a few times, and it's like, well, isn't this reality television? And it's like, well, maybe we just didn't get that shot. Can you guys do that again? Okay, so where is that on the spectrum of reality different than what we saw in something like Bloody Nose's Empty Pockets? Like the lines are really blurred. Like what's more real? Like what layer of verisimilitude gets more credit than the other? Like I
yeah,
almost would say that this scripted written thing starring these very real people behaving in very real ways in some ways could be more real than that acted out scene from the real world which was ostensibly quote unquote reality television in some
right,
level of a documentary. But like when you live in a place like Las Vegas and you actually go to those places where they're filming those things, we talk about the curtain being pulled back. You actually get to see this is bullshit.
yeah.
And it's not even honest bullshit. It's like just bullshit. It's not true at all. And it's funny you said that because that triggered those memories of that period of time when we were going to those fucking like expensive ass nightclubs and shit like that. And we just got it in our heads that we wanted to be there and we would see all this reality show shit happening around us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm going to go to another piece that is too new to actually be a real influence on this movie, but I feel works as a really great companion piece to this movie. And it's also from 2020. It's called Another Round. It's a Danish film from Thomas Vinterberg, which is probably going to be up for the foreign film Oscar this year.
The movie looks so good. I want to see it.
It's great. It's absolutely great. And it stars Mads Mikkelsen as this teacher who, along with some of his other teachers that he's friends with, they're kind of at a point in their
German.
life. They're all kind of German. They're at a point in their life and their career where they just feel like kind of in a rut and they don't feel like they've got anything going on really. And there's this theory that the human body is born lacking 0.5 or is it 0.05% blood alcohol content?
Yeah, the way I read it is that there's this like theory, like you say, that that the human body is born and operates throughout life at a deficit of what should be a 0.5% or 5% or 0.5%. I don't know, whatever. Just like halfway, basically like you should be going through life half drunk.
Yes, exactly.
Is the idea. Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense the way that they put it. And of course, it works really well to begin with. And I'm not going to spoil where things go. But the point being, though, the reason why it makes such a great companion piece to this is that, these people are just so lonely and just need, they need friendship. They need something more out of life, and alcohol kind of facilitates that. And for these people in the bar and Bloody Nose Empty Pockets, gathering around alcohol and drugs and they get that kind of community. But of course the problem is keeping a balance within life, because of course once those things come into the picture, things can go bad quick. And so it's important, for like a character like Michael in this movie, to impart that wisdom that, get out of here because, don't come back, because it's not going to be good if this is your life going forward. So I think that they're really great movies that deal with similar themes in that way.
So I can't wait to see that movie. I think it looks great, but I can't really comment any further on it. And I also don't want to ruin it for anybody because it's kind of like a new movie, and
Yeah.
I watched the trailer or whatever, and obviously things, there's a third act to every movie, and things appear to go awry. And I'm not going to like get into like what it looks like happens, but
Sure.
it's a bunch of middle-aged guys that decide that they want to get drunk all the time, and they have normal family lives. Just imagine hijinks ensue.
Yes. Yes.
So like, all right. My next piece, on the opposite end of the spectrum, I would be stunned if my piece did not have some influence on this movie. I would be shocked if we sat the Ross brothers down and strapped them into the polygraph machine, and they said that they had never seen this movie and that it didn't have any influence. It's a movie that I've recommended to you a lot, and you haven't watched it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's freely available. It's on YouTube right now. It's called Last Night at the Alamo. It's from 1984. It was something of a lost film from the late great Eagle Pennell, who was this Austin filmmaker who was the stuff of legends. He was one of the sort of like kind of like a founding patron saint of South by Southwest. He was one of the I guess he was sort of like a big influence on Richard Linklater and that entire Austin film movement. And if you watch this movie Last Night at the Alamo, you will see where Richard Linklater got a lot. Like you'll feel like you're watching a very like a proto version of Slackers. You'll feel like you're watching very, very early Linklater. You'll understand where that sort of I don't know if there's like some sort of film term for that pattery, unhinged dialogue that ends up getting really refined and done really well in the various midnight movies down the road. But that Linklater, that signature Linklater dialogue of the way that characters interact with each other and the way that characters in scenes feel like they're the only people in the universe to each other, and it's just those two people in the whole world. And this is a very rough movie. Like it's very rough hewn, tattered around the edges. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's about the last night at a bar that's going out of business, and all of the patrons coming together for one last party. And this happens to be called the Alamo, and it's in Houston, which is kind of a little joke because the Alamo is in San Antonio. So it's a bar. It depicts a lot of it depicts the 1984 exact slice of society that Bloody Nose Empty Pockets depicts. The exact characters. You can draw one-to-one comparisons on a bunch of the characters. Now it's the 80s. The portrayal is a little bit different, but it's still done in that very, like, as I said before, direct cinema kind of way where it's like, you don't feel like these characters are acting. It's a lot of them feel like they're just working off of prompts.
Yeah.
Eagle Pennell was a very shoot from the hip type of director. Obviously, he died very young from alcohol abuse and from drug abuse and had his own problems. But during his time, directed some brilliant independent film. A lot of, and was incredibly influential on filmmakers like Richard Linklater and a lot of other people. So Last Night at the Alamo, it's on YouTube. You can go find it. You can watch it. It was a lost film for a long time. I randomly saw it at South by Southwest one year when they had recovered a print of it. It's a great movie. It's funny. It's loose. It's unhinged. It has an element of sadness. Yeah, great movie.
I'm looking forward to it. It is on my to-do list to watch this movie. I'm going to watch this movie, and it sounds really great.
A lot of influential, like you can see it had to influence like Kevin Smith, early Kevin Smith stuff, like very dialogue driven, snappy, pattery. You see 80s movies and they don't sound like that, and today all movies sound like that. Everybody talks like real people talking, instead of bullshit. Instead of like. It's just that moment. You and I always talk about that little 10-year moment where the way that actors act changed.
Yeah.
Like they went from acting like actors to acting like people.
Sure. Yeah. Well, That's a good transition to my next piece. This is probably the only one on my list that I think maybe had actual definitive influence on these directors. And it's actually a filmmaker. It's Harmony Korine. And really just like his whole style, like going back to writing kids to the stuff he's directed, Gummo and Spring Breakers, to a lesser degree, The Beach Bum. And, just centering his films around these people who just feel like this guy just showed up with the camera and found some people and started filming them. And, as we've been talking about through this whole conversation, that level of authenticity is something that it's really pretty damn magical that these directors have been able to pull out of these, for the most part, non-actor performers. And like to
Right.
really make them feel like such real people is so amazing. And that's something that has been like really a hallmark of Harmony Korine's career. And then also in a review I read earlier today, I happened to notice someone else point out this comparison, and also the fact that the closing song in this movie, Peggy Lee's "Is That All There is used in two Harmony Korine movies. So there's another comparison right there.
Can we talk about really quick the last scene, Michael? Another just just rapier, sharp, like small, understated, but perfect performance by Michael Martin. The last few lines of dialogue delivered in this movie while he's Do you remember the ending of the movie or no?
Yeah, where he's got that anger.
Yeah, like the way that I guess there's like a morning bartender who comes in. It's not the same bartender. It's the morning shift bartender who comes in, and Michael Martin's character is asleep on the couch, and she tells him he has to get going. The bar is closing, and it's closing for good. And she's having just a really casual conversation about, I think, moving either to like Colorado or going on like a trip to Europe with, another employee who's there. And, the woman's being sort of very perfunctorily polite with him, but he packs together his stuff and just sort of, she asks this very like kind of, when people ask you something but they don't really care about the answer, she
Right.
asks like, oh, you got someplace to go, you got somewhere to drive you? And I think what is implied is like she doesn't understand what his circumstances, that he's a homeless person.
Right.
He does not have a house. He's going out onto the streets, and kind of under his breath he just says, "You never fucking knew me at all, did you?"
Mhm.
And she goes, "What's that? What's that, hun?" And he's like, "Just nothing. Never mind." And on his way out, he kind of stops in the doorway and says, "You had a really great place here."
Yeah.
And it's such an affecting line and delivery and close to the movie. It's unbelievable, so good. And I think that the song is playing at that time, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that that's what that was the needle drop for the song?
Right. Yeah,
Um,
just then.
yeah. So how about this one, Dave? I think this is one of your maybe all-time favorite movies. I think I remember you really liking this movie, or maybe I have this wrong. Anyway, I had mentioned Sherry Springer Bergman and the team of Sherry Springer Bergman and Robert Pulcini earlier when I talked about their 2011 work on Cinema Verite. But more people probably remember them from their 2003 Paul Giamatti classic American Splendor,
Hmm.
and which I don't know if you ever saw that or not. I feel like that was a movie you liked,
Yeah,
and
sure.
like took me a little while to like get into that. Anyway, it tells the story of I forget the guy's name, the cartoonist, the very famous. Whatever, you can drop it in here later. I don't know, fucking whatever. It's the cartoonist guy from fucking American Splendor,
Yes.
and it's got the same kind of feel. It's got the same kind of vibe. It's got the same kind of like, they use some characters that are not actors, and this incredible actor Paul Giamatti is interacting with them in a very real way. I believe that there's actually a few scenes where he interacts with some of the people from the actual cartoonist's life, and they do like fourth wall breaking and a lot of really fun cinema stuff in that movie. When's the last time you saw American Splendor, Dave?
I haven't seen it in a long time, but I
Am I
believe
just hanging that on you that you were like a fan of that movie? I thought that you were for some reason.
you are a little bit. I've seen it one time, and it's a very good movie. But I believe I'm going to be watching it for an upcoming episode of Awesome Movie Year.
Awesome movie year. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So
Yeah, I haven't seen it for a while either, but I got the same vibes off of it that I did in this movie.
well, I'm looking forward to revisiting it. I will go for my next piece, and this one actually I think kind of connects a little bit to what you were just saying about that final scene with Michael, but I'm gonna go with Charlie Kaufman's Anomalisa, the stop motion animated film that he put out. Directed, actually co-directed by Duke Johnson, I believe the name was, who did the actual animation portions. But it's this movie about this guy who has this condition where everybody in the world has the same voice until he meets this girl, and her voice is just like this ray of sunshine. Until spoiler alert for Anomalisa, but it's about an 8-year-old movie at this point. The voice starts going back to the same voice that everybody else has, and it's just about this guy who just absolutely cannot connect with any or anything, and who so desperately craves human connection in some way. And all these people at this bar, like some of the stuff we were talking about, like they just so are in need of connection. They aren't getting it from they either don't have, or they're just alienated from family or friends or anything like that outside of this little community that they've built. And so this bar, the Roaring Twenties, it is their community, it is their family, it's the people that they are getting that kind of connection from. But it's closing, it's going away, and that also brings this heavy hardness to it. And as we see in that final scene with Michael, it's just it's heartbreaking that these people might not get to continue having each other. And in Anomalisa, you end on this, typically Charlie Kaufman depressing fashion of this guy who just has no connection to anything.
It's the only Kaufman movie I still haven't seen.
Oh, wow.
I have to say it. Yeah. So I have to take your word on a lot of that. But I know you've talked about that ad. Now I'm remembering the movie that if you track all the pieces on piecing it together that have been pieced, probably the most pieced movie is Adaptation.
I'm sure I've brought that up a million times.
A million times, yes. Yeah.
It's possible that I've brought up Eternal Sunshine more though, but definitely lots.
Oh yeah, that could be too.
So, all right, what do you got next?
So the next one I have is maybe a little basic, but I think it holds. 1995's Leaving Las Vegas, which was this, for those who don't remember, this boozy, bloodstained, suicidal romance that how the hell did they? Only in the 90s could you have gotten this movie financed and made. Like there was never a point where you could make this kind of. There was like the same thing with like psychosexual thrillers and like weird sexy shit in the 90s. People were weird. Very very the 90s was a very strange time. Nick Cage was playing a falling apart, breaking down writer who was on a quest to. I feel like this is like anybody who's listening to this podcast probably already knows the rundown of Leaving Las Vegas, but he was on a quest to drink himself to death. Obviously, Elizabeth Shue, as a Las Vegas prostitute, introduces herself into his life, and slowly, I guess, it's a little more complicated than this, but gives him a reason to live, and then the dynamics kind of change in the relationship. It was directed by John Figgis, kind of like the only really good thing he ever made, right? Like, I don't think he really made much else.
Yeah, not that I could think of. Yeah, no, I think so.
I mean, he made things, but nothing like this. Right. Like, got a lot of Academy Award consideration, and gave Nicolas Cage his only Oscar. Or does he have two? He just has one, right?
I think just the one.
It's hilarious because you can never take it back. Nick Cage has an Oscar. Well, there's nothing anyone can do about that.
He's fucking amazing, so that's okay.
Absolutely deserved it. So yeah, I mean, we talked earlier in the episode, which now is dragging on pretty long, but we talked earlier in the episode about like showing that middle ground, that middle distance of Vegas, that like kind of real Vegas. People always say real Vegas. Like, what is real Vegas? Mm-hmm. This movie did it. There are scenes for sure in the 90s version of the Strip, and I think it was in like the Flamingo and the Riviera, and some of those like more for that, contemporaneously the more higher class casinos or whatever. But that, for instance, Elizabeth Shue works the floor in a lot of those places. But there were also bars that, I mean, it was probably shot in somewhere in Hollywood, but it was fashioned to look like, I don't know, Pinkies. It was fashioned to look like a lot of the bars that we're talking about I don't know. When's the last time you saw this movie, Dave?
Yeah, no, it's funny you asked that because that's what I was about to say is I haven't seen it since like when it first came out, or maybe not first came out, like when it first came out on video. But I was actually thinking about watching it in anticipation of this episode because I had thought of it, but I haven't
It's
seen it
worth
in
a
so damn
rewatch.
long.
It's got a lot
Yeah,
of it's a good Vegas movie. It's got a lot of Vegas Easter eggs, and there's a
I gotta
bar.
watch it soon.
There's like a pool hall bar that, and again, I don't know. There's no database to find where these things were shot, but it looks a lot like this bar that you and I used to spend a lot of time in called Pinky's. And it looks, and it's funny to see it on film and be like, is that Pinky's? Which is a very unique sort of pool hall where it was just this like sea of pool tables leading up to like a raised bar that goes back down into like a pit where they had wet t-shirt contests.
Mhm.
It was a very unique bar that I think has been demolished for
Yeah.
years.
Actually,
in
there's a
Vegas.
Chick-fil-A there now, I think.
Cum si, cum sa, I suppose.
Well, I'll do one last puzzle piece here, and it really kind of goes along with that last one, and is kind of retreading some of the territory we've been talking about here. But it's Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson. Yeah, yeah. Again, it's just this movie about just craving connection, being in this place where you just don't have anybody to commiserate with and to have any kind of friendship or anything with, and just craving that so much and finding it, and these people find it within this bar that were in 20s.
Yeah, I mean, we talk on Bird Road a lot about this, right? The epidemic of loneliness.
Right.
That's probably the defining characteristic. We talked about that of this of this age, I would say, and then we talked about that a lot before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel honestly, I don't use the word blessed a lot because that's like some live, laugh, love, Target shit.
Right.
I feel like like some Facebook mom, Instagram influencer bullshit. But like, I do really feel blessed that I have a few friends. I have you. I have my family every single day going through this stuff in this house, loving each other, fighting, yelling at each other, like being with each other, laying down next to each other at night. And all that I can think of sometimes is the dynamics around this country that have separated people and partitioned people into little apartments and single person domiciles. And then even some people who like do have either roommates or family that they live with, but they're spiritually disconnected from them. They might as well be living alone.
Yeah.
And the counterparts might as well be living alone too. And all the things that our culture has done to like break up the bonds and break up these institutions that actually cure loneliness, or at least in the case of the Roaring Twenties, they're not a cure, but they're a salve for the loneliness, at least,
Right.
And I can't help but think, like, here's a question maybe to end this on. Like, what do you think these people are doing now, right? In the
Right.
last 9 months? Because they filmed this, I think, in 2016. These characters, like, what would they be doing now? We kind of downplay the idea of like really deleterious mental illness and eventually suicide, because usually when people talk about that shit, they're doing it because they're bringing it up in context of trying to say like, oh, it's worse than the actual pandemic, and they're doing it in a bad faith way. And
Right.
you want to tell people like that to fuck off.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're 100% wrong. People are suffering in way worse ways than you and I with our our beautiful wives and our wonderful homes are, and a lot of the people that we know, and our loving families. I mean, like, I think that's, even though this movie was made 4 years ago, it actually makes it really timely because it hits what you're talking about, which is the subject of like just profound loneliness.
Yeah, no, and it's yeah, hadn't even really thought about it. Like I certainly had thought about the bar experience and hanging out with people being so it feels so foreign now, like after these past
Yeah.
9 months. But I hadn't thought about these people specifically, like where are they now? And yeah, I mean, it's really sad to think because a lot of them, I just don't see how they'd survive something like this, you know?
Yeah, and then like, what does not surviving something like this look like? Because do they? Is it? I mean, when you say not survive, that can mean so many things. Like it can mean dying, it can mean being exposed, it can mean like, especially in Vegas or a place like Miami, two of the most cruel places in the world to be housing insecure or to be
Mhm.
homeless. But there's all these other shades of gray, right? Like maybe you have a place to stay, but like your employment gets fucked up, or maybe like you're on a good path with your sobriety and that gets derailed. Like there's so many shades of like what is not making it or not surviving look like it might not even involve dying. It could just mean like going from where you're hanging on to that last rung of society to where you just fall off.
Yeah. I think we should
Incredible movie. I don't want to end it on a negative note like
yeah.
that. The movie did, those are like horrible, terrible existential quandaries and circumstances that we're all fighting, some way more than others, obviously, like I say. And this movie just did an incredible job of exploring them and illustrating them. So I know that you
Absolutely.
usually end this with like a broad stroke of a review of the movie, and I think that people could probably tell from our overall conversation that we really liked it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a movie also that I liked a lot more the second time, like understanding what this movie is, trying to convey. It really just all kind of comes together. So people should definitely check it out. I do want to conclude the conversation. We still haven't really talked about what bars this is. We should briefly touch on that
Yeah.
because with our extensive research during our 20s, we should have a few ideas. What do you have? Did you like make a little list?
It's in the old noggin.
All right.
How about this? Let's clear some that we already both talked about, like Cheers.
Sure.
Right?
Cheers
Cheers
I think that's
was a
good one.
bar that was located on the
Maryland and Flamingo.
4500 block of Maryland Parkway, I believe.
Sounds about right.
And yeah, near Escondido. If you know Las Vegas, you know that intersection. It was directly across the street from UNLV, like one of the main entrances. I guess that would be like the east side entrance of UNLV.
By the best Roberto's.
By the best Roberto's, yeah. It was the best. That was the best Roberto's. I guess that structure is demolished now, right? That's
It's
not
gone.
there anymore.
It's gone. Yeah.
That's gone. Okay. All right. So I had Cheers. How about you? What do you got? I'll toss out I've got a few. I've got a couple.
Okay. Well, the first one that kind of came to mind for me is a place we only went a few times, or maybe we went more than I'm remembering. But you remember the Rum Runner on Tropicana
Rum
and
Runner.
Spencer?
Thank you. Yes, on Trop, across the street from a place that we went to a lot called Crown and Anchor.
Mhm.
Across the street and down the street a little bit.
Also across the street from
Crown.
the Liberace Museum that you brought up earlier.
That's right. Yeah, that's a puzzle piece within the episode.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. But that is
All right,
just
Rum Runner.
such a
Rum
just,
Runner was this. Rum Runner is a chain, but the one you're talking about specifically is the one on Trop, on
Yes.
East Trop.
Yeah, specifically that one, because that one just it felt like its own little thing, and it has that kind of authentic dive bar feel that the other ones kind of don't have. The other ones feel kind of like smaller PTs, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
The other ones feel like, and when we say that, that's shorthand for like PT's Pub is a chain, the dominant chain of bars in Las Vegas.
I always forget that they're not all over the country.
They're They're basically
everywhere.
like if you can imagine like an Applebee's with gaming, like in the bar. That's what it is. It's like the food is good, like it's good food, and the beers are reasonably priced. Everything's fine,
Mhm.
and it's just like boring. It's like very boring.
Yeah.
And everybody has their PTs that they love, and you and I had several, but PTs do not equate to this. This is not PT's Pub.
Right.
Well, the Roaring Twenties is not a PT's Pub.
Right.
How about this one, Dave? How about if we dip into like where I just describe generally where they were because I don't remember the names.
Okay, I'll see if I can.
How about that? And you, okay. So you used to live at one point off of Warm Springs, and there was a bar that we would occasionally walk to across the street from where you lived.
That's really
you remember the name of that place?
Oh my God. I'm going to try to look it up. Continue to describe it, and I'm going to try to look up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dave lived on like a street that was just off of Warm Springs in the like kind of the area where Las Vegas becomes Henderson, and it's just this sort of like suburban wasteland. And It was not close, this bar. We would walk in the freezing ass cold. Sometimes if our cars would break down. This was at the one time.
I found it.
This was at the time when like Dave always had the reliable car and I never did. But there was a period of time where his car was breaking down, the Ultima. And so what was it called, Dave?
It was called Chris's Place.
Chris's Place. Yes, Chris's Place was Roaring 20s. Am I that track? Does that track or
no, that's a really good one. That is a great one. And
how about this one?
I couldn't tell you what it looks like on the inside, but I think it was fairly similar.
Yeah, because we usually couldn't see when we would get there. We couldn't even like see straight. How about this one, Dave? Again, just describing in Henderson, in what's colloquially called Green Valley part of Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
There's this part where everybody makes a joke that there's like the intersection of Sunset and Sunset.
Mm-hmm.
You get to one part of Sunset and you make a right and you're heading towards this flashy mall called the Galleria Mall, right? And before you get there, there's a bar on the right called Thirst Busters. But forget about that. If you made a left, there was a bar that would be on the right-hand side that we spent many hours in. There was one pool table. We would hang out there with the inimitable Johnny Rubs.
Yes.
And spend many, many hours at that place. And there were a lot of local, colorful characters at that place. Another one where the name escapes me. It might not even be standing anymore. You may not be able to find that place anymore. But that was another spot, as it were.
Wow. I cannot remember the name of that place. I need to figure this out. I'm
just north of Sunset and Sunset. There was a shopping center with like a Albertsons, I suppose, or maybe a Smith's.
I don't think this was the name back then, but it's called Lucky Joe's Saloon. I don't think that was the name. Yeah, but this is it.
Yeah, it was called something else. It was called something else back then.
Wow. I wonder what that was called. I can't remember. Man.
It was called something ridiculous.
Yeah,
I remember.
I'm sure. I'll throw into the mix here Money Place.
Dreamers. What about Dreamers?
Dreamers too. Yeah, Dreamers.
Oh, Money Place. Okay.
Yeah.
Money Place. Now you're in our wheelhouse. Okay. The things that we've been naming so far have been fringe things.
Yes.
Dreamers. Money Place is core narrative for us. Like you can place many, many key moments of our lives at Money Place.
Absolutely.
I probably only spent about 30% of my time at Money Place with you. I went to Money Place with many other characters in my life. That was
solo power.
That was a very. I spent maybe a 12-hour period with Demise there one night.
Oh yeah.
Like we got there at like 6:00 on a Valentine's Day. We hung out at Money Place from 6:00 until 6 a.m. I think one night.
Yeah.
One Valentine's Day night.
Yeah, Money Place is a good place, and I unfortunately think it recently closed. From what I heard.
Oh, that's a real gut punch.
Yeah, but
that's a tough one.
I think it made it all the way to COVID, though. I think it closed like this past year. I think it's one of the things that went under.
Oh man, that's rough. What else you got? Come on, let's
throw some more
around.
Another one, probably
Off Ramp Lounge. You remember Off Ramp Lounge?
No, where was that?
Off Ramp Lounge was very rare. It was on the east side of town. Anybody that knew us knew that we were not. A far east side of town. We were not east side guys. We weren't hanging out on the east side. It was where you would exit off of what is that windy, like the 93/95 or whatever.
Okay.
And near Nellis.
Oh.
Near like Nellis.
God, we only went out that way. Pretty rare that we went out
very
that way.
Rarely.
Yeah.
Usually it was just like as a goof.
Yeah.
And Off Ramp Lounge. That might not even exist anymore. I wonder, you think that survived COVID? What do you think?
Jesus Christ.
Off Ramp Lounge, Las Vegas. Closed.
Yeah.
3935 East Charleston.
Charleston. Yeah, it is off 95 in Charleston.
Yep.
I do remember
off the 95
it now.
in Charleston. There's like a whole early, even maybe before you and I were hanging out together very much when we were teenagers, sneaking into places, like Sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
How about Sneakers?
Okay. Yeah. See, now I never really got to go to Sneakers because I didn't have a fake ID. So
yeah, you needed the fake ID. Mm-hmm. And then the one night at Sneakers, I was there with Darren, who's a friend of ours.
A lot of shout outs in this episode.
Yeah, a lot of shout outs. I mean, you gotta have shout outs in this kind of content.
Yeah.
So Darren and I walk up, same bouncer that's always there, checks our fake IDs, lets us in, we get drunk, we leave. Wake up the next morning, on the news, that bouncer went into a Publix off of West Flamingo and gunned down like 10 people. And it was like one of the first like mass shootings caught on tape, because this is cell phone era, but it's before you had cameras on your cell phone. But this was on like a Smith's or something like that. Do you remember this shit or no?
I don't.
The guy that like walked around with the shotgun and like people were hiding underneath the produce and shit like that.
God,
you don't remember this story? It was like a fucking enormous national story for weeks, and then they found that he had rented a room in somewhere downtown. He was a local, but he rented a hotel room and tied up a sex worker and like left her there, and didn't kill her, but like left her in the room tied up, and she was saved, fortunately. I mean, like, she was rescued. I guess they found her, but yeah.
Well, that's the show, folks.
So there's a story. Michael Martin for Oscars.
Hi, this is Wax Trax Records here on 2909 South Decatur. We buy all your old 45s, your old albums, any type of music memorabilia. Also, we sell music memorabilia, albums, CDs, and a lot. Come on down to Wax Trax, 2909 South Decatur, or give me a call at 702-362-4300. Thank you very much.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets. Like I said at the top of the show, if you liked that conversation, make sure to go check out Bird Road, because we get into all kinds of other stuff. And, of course, I still manage to squeeze in movie conversations over there as well, because it wouldn't be me if I didn't do that. So check out Bird Road wherever you listen to Piecing It Together. And, also make sure to follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Don't forget about our Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And we've got that Patreon produced by David Rosen, where there's all kinds of advanced and special episode content, as well as stuff from my music career. So lots of great stuff to check out over there. And you know what? After this episode, I don't know when you'll be listening to this, but at the time that this episode goes up, I have nothing else scheduled for Piecing It Together at the moment. So hopefully by the time this came up, I will have already recorded some new stuff, but I got nothing. So there are lots and lots of 2021 movies coming out that I am going to want to cover. So if you enjoy Piecing It Together and have always been thinking, I'd like to join Dave over there and talk about movies through the lens of what other movies inspired them, well, now's the time to get in touch with me, because it's time to start planning some new episodes. So don't forget, you can follow me over on Twitter at PiecingPod, or join that Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces group, or just go to our website, piecingpod.com, and you can contact me through there. I'm always looking for new co-hosts, so get in touch. So let's close this thing out with a piece of music. And I always tend to do this whenever I have Q on. I like to close it out with a track called Free Fall from my album Head Like Fire, because for a few years it was the opening theme for the Bird Road podcast as well. So it's always a fun one to play whenever Q's on. So this is Free Fall, and it's, again, from my album Head Like Fire. Go check out that album. It's available everywhere. And we'll be back with more Piecing It Together, I'm sure, real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.